I guess drug trafficking can still continue on if the courts get a little preoccupied. If there's a little bit of a delay, organized crime is okay.
Disrupt America that I fought for.
Weird thing to happen. I have long stated and probably will continue to state this, as many articles I've seen about this, but our judicial system is a joke. And that is not hyperbole. That is not, just going over the top. It is literally a joke. It is such a laughingstock to protecting people from crime, from protecting society and Canadians from the most heinous actions, just on obvious fronts, just on the fact that it's become a revolving door, that people with multiple offenses, they get locked away, they get on bail, and then they go back to prison, and so on and so forth, and the just absolute lunacy of this. It's just so insidiously insane. And it just keeps getting worse and worse, folks. Because I saw this from Juno News. BC fentanyl trafficking charges tossed due to court delays. The British Columbia Supreme Court has stayed proceedings against the women facing fentanyl and other drug trafficking charges, along with possession of a prohibited weapon. The British Columbia Supreme Court has stayed proceedings against a woman facing fentanyl and other drug trafficking charges, along with possession of a prohibited weapon, ruling that her charter right to a timely trial was breached. What? What? So they're throwing out the case because the courts were a little behind. Again, it really just highlights what a laughingstock this is. What a joke the judicial process is. Margaret Rose Conrad was one of the 3 people charged with drug and weapon offenses in November 2022 after investigation by the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit of British Columbia and the North Chowachin RCMP. A police search in March of 2021 led to charges for the possession of the purposes of trafficking fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine. According to court records, a subsequent search in August of 2021 resulted in the seizure of fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, firearms, cell phones, and a large quantity of cash and other items thought to be linked to drug trafficking. In a decision delivered on June 4th, BC Supreme Court Justice Douglas Thompson found that the total delay from the swearing of the information on November 3rd to the anticipation trial conclusion on August 22nd, 2025, exceeded the 30-month presumptive ceiling established by the Supreme Court of Canada in R versus Jordan by 3 months and 20 days. So, I guess drug trafficking can still continue on if the courts get a little preoccupied. If there's a little bit of a delay, organized crime is okay, according to our courts. According to this. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? The Jordan Principle, as it's sometimes colloquially referred to, was established by the Supreme Court of Canada in R versus Jordan and sets presumptive ceilings for 18 months of provincial court trials and 30 months for superior court trials to ensure an accused's right to a trial within a reasonable time under Section 11B of the Canadian Charter. Delays exceeding those ceilings are presumed unreasonable, requiring the Crown to justify them or risk a staying of proceedings. So, if that's the case, why didn't the Crown and the courts just explain why they were behind? Why are they allowing a drug trafficker who is obviously convicted? Why would they just let her free? Why would they let her free instead of just explaining this? The framework attributes delays to the Crown defense or exceptional circumstances, discouraging system systemic what does it say? Systemic insolvencies and tactical delays. The court similarly reject the Crown's argument that the defense actions caused sufficient delay to bring the net delay below the 30-month threshold. The Crown argued that delays in scheduling a preliminary hearing and subsequent trial adjournments were attributed to the defense, particularly citing the accused's request to call a police witness at the preliminary hearing and a revised charter notice filed in June 2024. However, Justice Thompson ruled that these actions were legitimate steps taken to respond to the charges and did not constitute defense delay under the Jordan framework. The records show no delay solely or directly caused by the accused, Justice Thompson stated, emphasizing that the defense's actions were within their rights to prepare a full answer in defense. The court's Metro's review of the case, chronologically supported by those submissions from counsel, led to the conclusion that the entire delay was attributed to systemic or Crown factors. Conrad faced a 8-count indictment, including possession of controlled substances for the purpose of trafficking and unauthorized possession of a conducted energy weapon, stemming from a search of a trailer she occupied on August 6, 2022. She was arrested that day, released, and then later rearrested in November 8, 2022, following the issuance of a warrant. Way to go, guys. Way to go. We convicted someone of trafficking the most illicit drugs and in possession of a non-authorized energy weapon. I don't know what they mean by energy weapon. And then let her go and then re-convicted her. Clearly, this is literally a joke to people. Other countries would read this and burst into laughter about how our judicial process is in convicting criminals, making sure that Canadian life is safer. And you wonder why crime is skyrocketing in certain places. You wonder why. Eleanor Sturko, a BC Conservative MLA for Surrey, Cloverdale, and the Shadow Minister for Public Safety and the Solicitor General, took to X to voice her frustrations over perceived inaction and complacency in the BC justice system under David Eby and the provincial's NDP leadership. The NDP justice system is so bad that fentanyl traffickers are walking free because of delays, Sturko said. Making matters worse, Sturko added, the BC NDP has announced a plan to close the courts for a week during Vancouver's planned hostings of the FIFA World Cup next year. Apparently, is that like a religious holiday that people within the Justice Department have to watch the FIFA World Cup? So, not only are they so massively delayed that that's their excuse for releasing criminals onto the streets, but also they're going to shut down the courts for an entire week because of FIFA. What? What is going on here? What is going on here? Did they expect that the FIFA World Cup is not going to have any criminal cases to deal with? Do they expect it to be a slow week? Is that why they're closing down? As previously reported by True North, the dropping of Conrad's case falls into a larger pattern of criminal charges and criminal offenses related to fentanyl trafficking in particular being dropped across Canada. Elsewhere in Canada, Hamilton Police Chief Frank Burgeon voiced frustration and disappointment at the Police Services Board meeting after learning that the Public Prosecution Service of Canada had recently dropped 19 drug trafficking charges. These cases involve serious drug trafficking of fentanyl, cocaine, and opioids that directly affect our community, especially our most vulnerable, Virgin said. It is our understanding that these dispositions were not related to reasonable prospect of conviction, public interest, or the quality of police investigations. No, because they don't explain it. The courts don't even explain why they're behind, even though they have every right to do so. They have every right to say, well, we're behind, and this is why. So that's why we're pushing the date. And yes, technically, it's a violation of charter rights, but we have the override because of this. They're not even doing that. They're just letting them roam free. So that's a bit disturbing. That's a bit disturbing, to say the least, and just utmost joke of our judicial process in convicting criminals. Here's also this guy, Ron Chinzier, said a violent repeat criminal who set a Vancouver police officer on fire was out on bail, even though he was facing 10 separate charges. He's been in and out of jail since 2022. Yet thanks to Liberal bail bill C-75, he keeps getting released back into the community. This is exactly what happens under the Trudeau-Carney revolving door justice system. Dangerous criminals aren't being held accountable. They're being let loose. Carney and the same Liberal cabinet ministers who endorsed, championed, and defended Bill C-75 over years have no plans to change any of it. They'll stick with the same soft-on-crime catch-and-release program that's already failed Canadians. After nearly a decade of rising crime and chaos, we can afford a fourth Liberal term. It's time for real change. So, that was back before Mark Carney took the election. But that is a big statement there. That is incredible. And this happens so periodically. And it's amazing that, they have this revolving door for, violent criminals that do cause harm to members of our society. But they'll spend every ounce of time and energy and money to try to convict people like Chris Barber and Tamara Leach for the heinous crime of organizing a protest that did not harm anybody, a protest that had bouncy castles and kids and all people walks of life singing together in unison. They'll convict them. They'll try to get them 10 years for organizing a crime against the government. But convicting a violent felon with 10 separate charges is apparently too much to handle. And this is just, it shows the craziness of all this. That obviously our system is broken. Obviously our system is deeply, deeply eroded with mass amount of corruption, mass amount of scandal, and continuing on this crime spree. And that's exactly what, unfortunately, Mark Carney, the Liberal government, and all these politicians want. They want crime to run amok. They want chaos on the streets because they thrive on chaos. They want criminals to run havoc on neighborhoods so that neighborhoods, in left to despair, bend the knee towards an authoritarian government, and then we become a police state. That's the whole intention of all this. We're not conducting actions to reduce crime. They want to keep the crime going, which is why all this is happening. And even more so to this. Do you know about this? Thousands of foreigners with criminal convictions forgiven by Ottawa over 11-year span, raising transparency concerns. So, all the people that we have brought into the country, all the migrants that we apparently did not have time to look at their documents, do a background search, make sure they're appropriate and okay to become Canadian citizens or come into our communities. They immediately passed and forgave all criminals within that reign all their convictions. And this has been going on for 11 years. So don't tell me that this is just one person. Don't tell me that it's just, oh, well, it's just, David Eby of the NDP. Oh, it's only in BC. This is happening nationwide. This is conspiring to bring in criminals to get chaos on the streets, to emphasize how chaotic the city streets are becoming, that we have more authoritarianism, so we become a police state. Just like they were doing in the United States, they're trying to do that in Canada. They're trying to do that in the UK. They're trying to do it everywhere. And meanwhile, while the courts are saying that they're backed up and that's why we're releasing a bunch of criminals out to the streets, they're locking up people for social media posts. They're locking up people for the most non-violent crimes, for crimes that should not even be considered crimes. To show you how backwards this all is. But the establishment thrives on chaos. The establishment thrives on chaos, hence why they want to keep criminals on the streets, hence why they're doing the utmost backward-ass decision-making when it comes to basic judicial processes that, yes, you can be behind. Yes, courts do take longer than the estimated amount as described by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But that doesn't excuse a person who is involved in violent actions, involved in trafficking, drugs that are affecting communities. That doesn't forgive their crimes. That doesn't relieve their convictions. We need to have proper jurisdiction. We need to have a system of law and order to convict actual criminals. But we don't do that. We don't do that, do we? In fact, we're bringing in more criminals as we're speaking to keep the streets in chaos, keep you in danger, to keep your friends and family and members of your community in paranoid state so that the government comes in and brings in authoritarianism and people bend the knee towards it. This is all part of the master plan. And it is making a joke, an absurdity of our institutions. It's making an absurdity of the judicial process. And you wonder why. You wonder why all these crimes are continuous. You wonder why there's so much fentanyl trafficking between the United States and Canada. You wonder why Trump made such a big deal that he wanted to put tariffs on our country. Even though the Prime Minister, the Liberal Party, and the rest of Parliament saying, oh, it's less than 1%. He's overreacting. No, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And you are the guys that are causing it. You are the guys and girls that are causing this dilemma. You are deliberately ruining Canada. And you are the ones that are bringing on the tariffs. Not Donald Trump. You guys are. And you're not doing squat to relieve any of this. You are the worst representation of Canada. You're not representing anybody within the nation other than your self-interest.